Hello and welcome to the Growing Through the Text live show from strivenlife.com. This is episode number 1, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. So if this is your first time seeing me do one of these book breakdowns or talking about this, or it's the first time you're hearing about strivenlife.com, what we do is a lot of it is a value in lifelong learning. And so because of that, we have committed ourselves to doing 52 books a year. And we don't just read them, we take these books and we embody them and we learn them and we plan and try to find ways to use them in our own lives to improve ourselves, to build a better us. And if you'd like to join in on that challenge, the 52 books a year challenge, you can go to the link right below, strivenlife.com/Striven Library. On there, you can opt in and you will have an email sent out to you with a PDF listing out every single book that we're reading this year and the set goals for how many pages a day for that week that you should read. And you can always read along and tune into these shows to engage in that discussion. And if you don't feel like reading 52 books a year, you can always just cherry pick the ones that you're interested in and join in on those days too. And today on this show, we have a little guest, Emma Weatherall. Why don't you say hi and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me on here, Nick. I'm really excited to talk about this book because I absolutely adore it. So I'm Emma and I work with, business owners to help them create the lifestyle that they want, the income that they want, the freedom that they want, financial and time-wise. And I help them do that with online strategies, visibility strategies, and authenticity strategies. So how to kind of be yourself and really grow a tribe around you that is loving you for who you are. So that's part of what I do.
Beautiful. And where can people kind of follow along and kind of see more about what you're about?
Sure. So I'm most active on Facebook. I've got a group which you can find at theintrepidcommunity.com where we kind of help each other. We share tips and strategies, and I go live there a few times a week. And I've got a Facebook page which is facebook.com/Emma Weatherall. And my name I can see very kindly you put on the screen there, Nick.
Gotcha. In case you forgot,
Yeah.
All right. Well, so again, like I said, we are breaking down Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And I have to say, I like that cover better.
It's got nice shiny gold on it.
Mm-hmm. And I have to say that, I didn't know anything about this book until you suggested it to me. And after reading it, and I was talking about it in a group with some people in there, and a lot of us agree that it is the type of book that is almost like the basis of someone wants to start reading and going on this journey of self-improvement. It's like the basis that applies to everything we do in our lives, our work, our career, our family, our relationships, and our personal endeavors. So I am an absolute in love with this book. So really excited to talk about it today. So one of the first things that she starts to break down in this book is something called the scarcity culture and this constant state of lacking. And I remember one of the phrases in the beginning where she was talking about just how when we wake up in the morning, before we even get out of bed, before we push ourselves out, rip the sheets off of ourselves and greet the day and put our feet to the floor, we're already kind of having these feelings of, I didn't get enough sleep. I'm too tired to do this. I don't want to do this. And sometimes it's a lot of, I can't do this. And that mindset kind of hits us first thing in the morning. And as we go all throughout the day, I'm definitely guilty of this from time to time of not feeling like you are enough or you don't have enough of whatever it is that you think you're lacking in life. And I guess the question would be kind of, where do you think this scarcity culture is coming from and how does that impact us in our families and our lives and our jobs?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of what Brene talks about is in the book in terms of scarcity is actually a lot of kind of cultural and societal pressures that we have, things that we absorb from other people. She talks about scarcity as something that we absorb through impressions of other people that we think other people have of ourselves. So I know that she talks about, later on, and I think you're going to talk about this a bit later, she talks about scarcity for men and women. So how we kind of experience a lack of our sense of self and what we think that people expect from us, and we kind of project that onto people because we all start doing it to each other, it becomes that kind of societal and cultural thing that we think is the norm, and that's how we have that scarcity, that lack. If we think, like you said, I haven't had enough sleep, and then someone else says, but we should get our 6 or 7 hours a day. Well, maybe we should get more than that, but because everybody thinks that this is, we just get up and we go to our job and we have this lack of connection, this lack of sleep, lack of eating well, that starts to become a norm, lack of, if you think, there's a scarcity in terms of, I don't think that I'm good enough, I don't think that my weight is low enough or whatever. Well, we all then start playing, we start making lighthearted of it even, that becomes cultural references, societal references, and that just perpetuates the whole problem. For me, that was the strongest thing that I found from her, is that actually we're all doing it to each other, and we absorb this by what we project onto other people from what they're projecting onto us. It's kind of a really vicious cycle. Yeah,
it's a conception into yourself. No, definitely. Like, as I was reading this, the first couple parts of the book that are all about this problem, and even throughout the entire book, I just kept thinking back to the 4 years I was a high school teacher, and how all of these problems are just so obviously prevalent through all of these teenagers. And they're growing up in the generation where it is the generation of social media and comparison, and you're not good enough, because every image they see on social media is someone's best possible image, where they, they take that selfie like 6 or 7 times, add a couple filters, maybe a cute little dog face on it, whatever, and then they put it out there. And so they're only seeing like this perfection from everyone's point of view. And then you look at the extraordinary, the people who are famous, the people that these kids look up to, and it's the same concept. It's these people living lavish lives, doing whatever they want, and living their dreams. And it's, it puts everything into they have that, I don't, because I'm not good enough type of feeling. And
then it takes it further, especially with teenagers, because when they have that, they absorb that for themselves, and then they're also going to judge their peers in that way. So that's then how you start to get that scarcity mindset among groups of peers, because they're saying, I don't have that, I want that. And they look at, Josh across the hall and they go, but he doesn't have that, and I have this, So they then start to judge other people by the same things that they're judging themselves, that they're seeing, that they feel like they don't have.
Yeah.
So,
that's crazy. And it's definitely the same thing. I think it's a lot more cryptic in like adults. Adults have become very good at hiding those things, knowing when to talk about people rather than just saying it straight to their face, and judging people quietly in like their homes and stuff too. So it becomes something that's deeply rooted in people, which I don't know.
It does.
It's tough.
And I think what I like about the book is that Brené then kind of puts together kind of a framework, I guess. She identifies, so we have the scarcity, then we absorb that kind of, so there's that sense of lack, and she identifies it as shame. So I found that shame concept in the book fairly difficult, because I think she actually defines it pretty different to how we would consider shame. She does have that same kind of sense of shame that we would see in an everyday sense, but she sees it also as a kind of protecting our vulnerabilities, and she kind of talks it as we have like these shields and these armors that we put up. So we imagine kind of what would come, so she talks about worthiness. So like, am I enough? So that's the scarcity that we're talking about. So am I enough? Do I have this? They have that. I don't. Does that mean I'm good enough?
Yeah. I think I lost you there for a second.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
There you go. You're good. Yeah.
Sorry. So she talks about boundaries, where she says kind of where you reach your limits and you say, I've had enough of this. I can't deal with this anymore. I can't push further than this. I can't do it. It's too difficult, that kind of thing. And then she talks about engagement, which is kind of what then the daring is, which is, okay, am I taking risks? Am I letting myself being seen, which we're obviously going to go to in the rest of this life. And she identifies those as kind of disarming the shields and the weapons that we put up of perfectionism, of numbing ourselves to things that we feel that we can't cope with, or things that we feel ashamed of, or things that we feel that we want and we can't have, so we kind of protect ourselves from it. Imagining bad things that are going to happen, or things that not experiencing joy when we think it's not appropriate, joy in the little things when we think, oh, well, it's not a big house, or it's not a, $100,000 job. So it's not worthy enough. So you clamp down on it. And that kind of flattens out the joy. So I really like how she kind of makes the shame and the scarcity. She kind of identifies how that becomes a vulnerability to us.
Yeah, and I think that whole chapter on the armory, I think she calls it, is just, I think reading that was a big wake-up call in a lot of different areas. Unfortunately, we can't get into every single one of those things today. I would love to. That'd take us a solid hour. But yeah, moving forward a little bit is this concept that I got all kind of giddy about when I was reading the book, marble jar. Right, so I'll kind of break down the concept for really quick. So her daughter had an issue with some friends at school, and she came home, she felt hurt, and didn't want to be with those people anymore, didn't want to be friends with them anymore. And then her mother brought up the concept of the marble jar that this teacher used in the class. And so what she would do is that every time the class was overall nice or did good things for each other or as a whole, they would add marbles to the jar. And when that jar got filled to the top, they would have a party. When students and people in the class would do things that were wrong or negative or mean, they would take marbles out of the jar. And it was a really, cool concept that when she was explaining to her daughter in that sense, and how it resembles exactly how relationships are supposed to work. I think so often and so quickly, people are so close to say, oh, you screwed me over, I'm going to smash the jar now. And there's no chance of building up those marbles. And in the same light, people are so wanting of engagement and connection that when they meet someone new and that jar is just starting off, if they do one or two good things, they immediately feel as if that jar is filled. And then, it's that your relationship really isn't at that point of depth yet, and you're relying on them for everything. And it sets people up for failure when it comes to their social life and engagement and connection with other people.
Absolutely.
And I think that just the fact that she sat down and had that conversation with her daughter was so powerful to me. I mean, I don't even have a kid. The wife and I are always kind of talking about it here and there. And it's that's something that I wrote down, and I was and I have a little reminder that's going to go off in 5 years, literally in my phone right now, to remember this concept, because it's just such a powerful ideal, I feel like. And I don't know, how do you see that concept in your life? How do you kind of engage with that?
So this is something that initially I struggled with a little bit from the book, because I think that actually initially it could come across as the opposite of advocating being vulnerable, because that's for me what the whole book is about how our vulnerability is a strength. I mean, she says that in the book, but that was really kind of that core concept that struck me. And with the marble jar concept, she's talking about how you can't have a trusting connection with someone when that marble jar is empty. If there's no marbles, if there's no kind of so for me, marble jars in a friendship are things like when people don't disrespect my time, or when people say they want to get together and they actually honor that. When people are not just always talking about themselves and they're asking at you, they actually care about what's going on in your life as well as theirs. And I'm sure that's marbles that I'm putting into their jar by being a good friend in that way. And lots of things, holding your trust, being there for you when you need support, that kind of thing are kind of marbles that are added into jar for me from a friend or a relationship. And they kind of come out in if people are gossiping, or if they're not telling you the truth about something, or not following through on promises. But the thing with that for me is that initially I was kind of thinking, well, this is telling me not to be vulnerable, because why would I have a connected relationship with new people if there are no marbles in that jar when you first meet someone, is the concept basically. And I'm like, well, why? How can I be vulnerable with that person when they haven't filled my jar yet? And how do you get to that point of letting them do the things like being a shoulder to cry on, or letting you see yourself and, as you are, with all the pieces hanging out and caring about you? How do you do that if you haven't had those trusting marbles in your jar? And for me, I'm single at the moment. I've been single for a long time, and I hadn't been on any dates for a long time. And this year I've been on a couple of dates, and this is me being vulnerable. This is me kind of putting myself out there and for some things, I was kind of like, well, do you know what? You can actually, if you can't have those marbles come in, if you don't be vulnerable, if you don't offer that opportunity to people to care about you, if you don't offer that opportunity to people, to someone to be supportive, if you don't offer that opportunity for someone to follow through on a promise, if you don't even give them the opportunity to make a promise, or to if you don't bring them something that they need to care about, then they can't offer you that and put a marble in your jar, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's what I found tricky.
That's exactly it. That's the one part of the entire book that I found that she even struggled to kind of really explain.
Yeah.
How do you start? Because they get into the concept of oversharing, where they think they called one like I forget the names, but it was like, when you don't know someone yet, but then you overshare a ton.
Yeah.
As a way for like attention and things like that. And it's like, how do you know when is the right time to increase that level of vulnerability? It's tough because, even I've thought about like, how do you even know when to do those things in my personal life when I'm meeting new people, meeting colleagues for the first time and stuff. And it's difficult because it's like you have to be able to, I think you have to be able to trust yourself to be able to gauge in the situation and how it's going and like when I can do that. But it was just interesting because, like you said, it was tricky, and she even struggled to actually give us a defined idea or a set line to know. Whereas with everything else in the book, she was like, this is it, and these are the signs, and these are the symptoms. This was interesting.
This is where I found that actually it's, I mean, you should say this for everything, but it's worth reading the whole book. Because for me, this is where everything kind of blends in together. So my example is, so this is where you, as you said, trust, but also I think having boundaries, respecting yourself and knowing what your values are. So I can give an example, like I said, because I'm single and I've been dating, and this is where I found this bit to be useful. So when you meet someone new, whether it's a friend or in my case, like if you're looking to start a new relationship, the jar is empty, like I said, okay? And so part of building that relationship with someone is seeing how trustworthy that person is, how much you can trust them, how much they're going to want to invest in you. Are they going to respect you? Not just in kind of the early stages of dating, but in the long run. But even in the early stages, that is really kind of crucial because, there's intimacy there. You want to see if there's chemistry. Is it just like a fleeting good moment, or are you actually, they're going to, sometimes I remember when I was younger, you could let guys get away with behavior that I would never, ever, let them get away with now. And that is part of having boundaries. But you have to use your vulnerability as a strength. You have to say, open up and say, I trust myself. I trust that I have boundaries and I am not going to let this person treat me in a way that I find unacceptable. But I am going to open up and put myself out there enough that they can show me that they're trustworthy if they are, and that they can see me for who I am, and we can actually start to forge a connection if that's going to happen. And that's where I found this aspect of the marble jar really important in terms of vulnerability, because you have to have those boundaries in your armory. You have to know yourself and trust yourself, but at the same time, and because of that, you're able to be more vulnerable because you know that you're going to protect yourself.
Yeah, and that's like the boundaries are so powerful. It's a matter and it's making those boundaries and then allowing people to come in and test whether or not they're going to push those or not. And that's how you're going to know which people are right for you and which ones are not. That's so spot on.
Yeah.
Really cool. And this kind of segues pretty well into this kind of concept where about love and relationships, which, again, she goes into so much detail in this book. You have to get the book and read it. It's amazing. But there's one section where she defines love. Now, she's doing this not off of her own like whims and just whatever her opinions are. She's been doing research for, I think, over a dozen years and interviewing people and asking about them, about these experiences and how they deal with these emotions of shame and pain and disengagement and things like that. And so I'm going to read it just because she nails it. So I got to give it justice. This is how she defined love. You cultivate love when we allow our most valuable and powerful selves to be deeply seen and known. And when we honor that spiritual connection that grows from that offering with trust, respect, kindness, and affection. Love is not something we give or get. It is something that we nurture and grow. A connection that can only be cultivated between two people when it exists within each one of them. Only love others as much as we love ourselves. Shame, blame, disrespect, betrayal, and with the withholding of affection damage the roots from which love grows. Love can only survive these injuries if they are acknowledged, healed, and rare. As soon as I read that, I took a picture of it and I sent it to my wife, and I was like, thank you for being amazing. Because, you know, I'm being corny and I'm getting brownie points here. Let me go. Because it's one of the points that she hits on so well is that love isn't something that you just get. You're not deserved. Like, we all deserve to be loved, but when you're building a relationship to the point of being in love, it is not something you just get or you just give. It's something that both people in that relationship have to really work hard on together in order to get that point. I feel like a lot of people think that it's like, oh, like I have a soulmate. And maybe that's true. Maybe there's one person who's the best for you in the world. But at the end of the day, it's the people that you can work through everything with and build that deep, meaningful relationship. And then, like she says at the end, it can only survive if these injuries are acknowledged and they're healed and they're rare. So, you know, she gave a really good example in the book of how there was one night this guy saw his wife looking as if she was like really upset and distraught, and she walked past the room and went into the bathroom. And he really wanted to go, I don't know if it was like video games or watch a show or something. He really wanted to do that, but then he knew that this is one of those times where being there for someone and giving that affection and thinking not of yourself but of your partner is such a crucial way to show that affection. And when we don't do just those simple things, that is something that also kind of hurts, you know, the basis of those relationships. I just thought it was such a powerful quote. Yeah. And it applies not to just, you know, girlfriend, boyfriend, or relationships, dating, marriage, whatever. I think it applies to all relationships. You know, I don't know how you've experienced this kind of concept in like your own relationships, if people kind of view it the opposite way, or if you have relationships where people view it exactly like this. It's a working in progress thing.
I think I've seen both ways. I've definitely seen both ways. And I think the one thing that I think the love aspect of this in Brené Brown's book is probably the most, I think that's probably what's going to strike people as the most validating aspect if you're in a relationship, if you're looking for one. Because I think most people, I think it's quite common that people would already understand or expect relationships to be kind of a give and take, and to be open to each other and to be passing things through and to be kind of creating a story. Like, I think what's great about what Brené Brown talks about in terms of love is how vulnerability in this sense and in kind of love and relationship sense is all about kind of crafting stories together and crafting stories that you can share with each other your separate stories, and people, you know, you can trust that that person in your relationship, you can share those things and they become enmeshed together, or that person cares about what you have experienced. But you also crafting stories together, and you can only do that, you can only kind of forge that path together if you are open with each other. You know, your hearts are open to each other, you're willing to kind of go through those scary things, you're willing to kind of go through those trials and tribulations, you're willing to be vulnerable together and individually. So that's kind of just takes the concept of a give and take in relationship that people are already thinking about and takes it further, because if we think about this, we're being vulnerable together, we're forging it together, we're being a partnership, but we're also being vulnerable individually in trusting those people. But also we have our own fears, we have our own things that we're trusting that those people will either understand because they know us really well, or that they will accept when they discover that that's something that we're struggling with. And we're also forging, you know, being vulnerable in allowing that fear to happen as we go through something difficult. So there's a lot of kind of complex things there that by having that kind of love that she's talking about is a really deep kind of giving and receiving in that way.
Yeah,
so
and that's like you said, it's in that one situation where like you're making those memories together. It's like just like you said, there's vulnerability is being experienced in three different forms with each other as a unit, and then from perception from the outside. And I think that's exactly spot on. It's that, you know, being in those situations and being vulnerable to that degree with each other, not only is it going to grow that relationship, it's also going to grow you as a person as you start to understand your partner more. And understand who you are and what you are to them.
And understand yourself. Yeah, exactly. And that's just going to make everything a lot deeper, a lot stronger, because as you develop as a person, as you grow, as you become more able to cope with things, because that's one of the key points in here. Vulnerability actually becomes a strength, because if you allow yourself to experience things that are challenging and difficult and possibly scary, you know, you're going to grow. You're going to become a more rounded and more deeper, a more kind of emotionally intelligent person in yourself, which is not only great for you, it's great for the people that you're in relationships with, whether they be friends, partners, husbands, family members, and it's going to be great as you kind of come together to do things. So, I mean, for me, I'm not in a partnership. I have this with my son, where the more kind of I'm vulnerable, I let him see me as being imperfect and open to experiences and open to trying new things and open to do things that might seem scary to me. That's modeling to him. So he feels like, oh, I can do this. You know, I can behave like that in my life. But it's also great for me because I feel like I become a stronger person to be able to take him, you know, guide him in the first few years and decades of his life. So that's beneficial to both parties, whether it's a parent or, I guess, a coworker, you know, a manager, or a relationship, you know, a loving relationship.
Exactly. And it's like every relationship is an opportunity for us to grow too. And that's definitely been the one thing that's been a continuous occurrence with like my relationship with my wife, is that she's always pushing me to do things to that I'm scared of or I'm afraid of, like this business in itself. She's the reason why I started it, you know, and I made that change and started doing it. So it's exactly, I think the people that you're with in those relationships not only help you grow, become stronger, more intelligent, more self-aware when you're vulnerable, but helps the relationship too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, on to our last little point that we want to talk about. I'll let you kind of take this one away.
Well, actually, we've touched on it already, actually, because what I mentioned to you was that I really got out of the book is the idea of embracing life, kind of being open to disappointment, open to failure, open to challenges that might not go the way that we think they're going to go. And we've kind of started talking about that already in what we were saying about relationships. My biggest takeaway, I mean, aside from kind of the relationship thing and with Daring Greatly, is about being vulnerable in the purest kind of core sense of the word in order to embrace life, in order to experience things that you may feel shame around, that you may feel scared around. So I've mentioned already about kind of dating. For me, that is scary. I hadn't been on a date for 8 years before this year. And that's scary to say to people, but I'm happy to say it because that's being vulnerable. That's kind of opening up and it's sharing an experience. But it was also, that's a scary thing to do after like 8 years of not having a date. But also the vulnerable aspect of it is putting yourself out there. You can't find a relationship if you don't put yourself out there. And people use that phrase all the time, but it's more than just kind of being present. I don't know, going on Tinder or like going to a singles bar or something. That's not putting yourself out there. Putting yourself out there is actually opening yourself up. It's actually being open to saying, okay, well, I'll take this step, or okay, I will say this thing to this person, even if I feel like I sound stupid, or even if I feel like he's going to turn me down or whatever. That's about opening yourself up, because you can't meet somebody unless you are opening yourself up to that opportunity. And the same in so many things, business opportunities, travel opportunities, experiences. What did I get? I was just thinking somebody offered me, so the other day, I was a pianist in a previous life. I was a professional pianist before I had my son. That was what my career was. And not many people know that because it was a long time ago. And I was talking with somebody who runs art workshops, and she was talking about things that she used to do. And I decided I was going to get in a conversation with my piano and about my piano. And we were talking about music, and she said to me, "You know what? Actually, in this new project that we're doing with children, we're looking for a pianist. We need somebody to come and work on this project." It was an amazing project with children who had learning difficulties in a kind of interdisciplinary with an art aspect, and they needed somebody to be providing musical accompaniment to some stuff they were doing. And I would never have got that opportunity. This is in a big conservatoire in London. I would never have got that opportunity. I'm going to be able to meet lots of other musicians, perhaps start getting back into networking, kind of that music scene. And that wouldn't happen unless I had made myself vulnerable, unless I had shared something that was a bit scary to me, because I felt shame around it. Because when I tell people I was a concert pianist, they're like, "Why do you not even touch pianos anymore? And you haven't for years." It feels shame around that. And I feel protective of something that is really close to my heart, that even has been difficult to me to to kind of process that I don't do that anymore. But I just decided I'm just going to put myself out there. There's this conversation happening. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to be vulnerable. And that actually became a strength, because I would not have been able to even know about, but let alone accept that opportunity if I hadn't been vulnerable. And for me, that's what the core of this is about. Whether it's dating, whether it's work opportunities, whether it's life opportunities, whether it's in kind of loving and already established, like, wedded relationships with partners, husbands and wives. By being vulnerable, by being open to disappointments, you actually have the strength not only to grow, like we've been talking about, but to embrace things that will come to you. I mean, my favorite phrase I have always said to my son before I even read this book was, what's the worst that can happen? You know, whenever there's an opportunity comes up, it's just been a mantra in my life. My dad used to say it to me, and I live my life by it pretty much. What's the worst that can happen when I'm making decisions? You know, if the worst outcome is something you can live with, it's probably going to be okay. And actually, when you say that, you usually find out that when you say like what the worst thing is, you usually like, the likelihood of that is pretty low. And that's what vulnerability is about. What's the worst that can happen? Well, actually, what's the best that can happen? And you can't discover that unless you put yourself open to disappointments, to failures. And even if the worst does happen, unless it's like being chased down by a bear, it's probably still going to be a growth opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Then I was going to say is that like that disappointment, people are so fearful of that, and that they're fearful of failing, and the perception of like, you know, what does that mean of me if I fail? That could be simply asking out somebody. It could be, you know, applying for a new job, whatever it is. And I think it was interesting because in the book she asks people that she was interviewing, how do you define success? And they were talking about this spectrum of either you're a loser or you're a winner, or you're either this or that. And people were defining people as being the two groups. And then when she asked them to define success, what they were saying had nothing to do with either being a winner or a loser. And it had to talk about certain things outside of that spectrum. And so clearly they're defining success in a different way than which the world is kind of viewing everything in that you know, finite extreme idea. And the same thing goes for failure. You know, it's you have to kind of take a second and look at it and say, how do I define failure? You know, there's the normal sense of what failure is, that like, oh, you didn't do it, or you didn't get the date, or you didn't get that job. But failure isn't that. I mean, to me, and this is something that I've been like, I really had to sit down and kind of reflect on about a couple months ago, is, you know, failure to me is that if you don't allow yourself the time, effort, energy, or like creativity in order to succeed at something. And failure is also when you let a rejection or a obstacle or some sort of adversity tell you when it's time to stop. You know, so it's like if you go for that first date and you're asking somebody out to go on that date and it goes poorly, if you let that say, oh, I can't do this, I'm not doing this again, then it's that is the failure, not the actual instance of what happened itself.
So Brene actually talks about this in the book, because the way that she characterizes this, like the date is a really good example, but also in jobs or any kind of experience, she talks about actually the fear or the shame that you feel if something goes badly is actually, she calls it power. Like she transforms that into power. You're giving them, or that experience, the power. So, you know, she talks about if you're asking someone out on the date, or if you have ever kind of loved someone or been in a loving relationship, or if you've been in a relationship that wasn't loving, you know that those emotions, those strong emotions, make you vulnerable by the very fact that you're allowing somebody or something like a job opportunity in your life, and you're giving them incredible power. Like you're infusing that person or that experience with power, which includes the power to hurt you. Like the power then to raise your life up. There's the power that you're giving them, that power to contribute to benefits in your life, but you're also giving them power to hurt you. And that's what the vulnerability is. It's giving somebody or something or some experience or some opportunity the power to go one way or the other. And so by accepting the state, you know, kind of the state of vulnerability, you have a shot at that good stuff, the joy, the love, the happiness, the whatever you define success by, the, you know, whatever that win is in that situation. And so what I think what the book is trying to do is she's trying to flip on its head that vulnerability isn't just the source of failure. Like, by being vulnerable, we're not just putting ourselves in the face, kind of in the pathway of pain, of failure, of grief. It's also actually, it's the root of so many positive emotions. And it's kind of also the, it's also, what's the word? It's also the, it's kind of a game of odds as well, because the more vulnerable you are, the more you open yourself up to opportunities of love, of good jobs, of kind of all sorts of things in life, the more often you're going to be able to receive positive outcomes, positive emotions. So it's not a black and white. It's kind of, you're being strong in that moment. You're being courageous by being vulnerable, because you're allowing yourself the opportunity to be hurt, but also the opportunity to come, you know, to have the greatness that could come with that. And the more you do it, the more often you're going to hit those positive things. And because you can lean in towards those, and then you'll also grow and be a better judge of, okay, well, what situations are going to be more positive? You know, how can I, and then the date situation you gave, and the date example you gave, if it does go really badly, if it is a failure, well, actually, that's exactly what you said. It's your definition of success and failure. Because to me, now I've read this and now I feel like my whole mindset has changed. You've actually learned a lot more about what you want from a person, what you want from a relationship. You've learned more about what you're not willing to accept in somebody, and what, you know, what you want from life. So that wasn't a failure. That was simply kind of one more step into understanding and being better able to choose, like, your heartmate.
Yeah, my science side always says it's just a failure is just a data point that we can use to say which way do we want to go next. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I think that's all we got for today, guys. I want to say thank you a bunch to Emma for coming on today. Lovely to have you.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. Again, if you're interested in signing up and joining and doing the 52 Books a Year Challenge, you can hit up strivenlife.com/Striven Library. And in the description,
do it. I've seen the books. They're awesome. I want to read all of them.
And if you want to be able to follow Emma a little bit more and you want to see what her group is about, those links are in the description. You can click them, follow her, show her some love. I've been secretly been her little cheerleader for the past couple of weeks now as we've gotten to know each other, and you should do the same. That's been it. It's Nick Rizzo, strivenlife.com, and we will see you guys later.